Not far from the small town of Elmbridge, on the edge of a picturesque valley, was the village of Mayfield. Its cozy houses were buried in the shade of apple orchards and tall oaks. On the outskirts, near the hillside, stood the elegant Rogers Mansion, surrounded by a large garden and several old walnut trees. One of the owners, William Roger, came home late. He was greeted by his eldest son, Henry, who was standing by the barn. "Henry, why are you staring at the apple tree like a cow at a new gate?" asked his younger brother, Thomas, who had just brought a bucket of water. Henry did not pay attention to his remark. His eyes were fixed on the place where he thought he had seen Suzanne last night, the girl who often came to the neighbor's garden. The sun was hiding behind the hills when Mrs. Martha Roger, the boy's mother, came into the yard. Her tall and slender silhouette cast a long shadow on the porch. Her features combined the natural beauty of a country woman with the sophistication acquired during her years of service on wealthy estates. She knew how to cook the most exquisite dishes and was a renowned culinary master. Martha called her sons and her husband to dinner, but William was strictly fasting and did not want to eat until sunset. He waited for the first bell to ring and went to the chapel. On his way, a woman shouted after him, "William, don't forget to go to Mr. Bates's to get paid for your work. But go straight home, don't stop at the tavern, you have to go to the fair tomorrow." The chapel was half empty that day, and William helped with the service. Afterward he went to Mr. Bates' estate to receive the money for the carts he had made. On his way back, however, he saw a tavern that beckoned him with its warmth and sociable atmosphere. Well, a drink on an empty stomach is not a sin, William thought, and went inside. Several local men were sitting at the table. William sat down with his godfather, George, and after drinking a glass, began to talk animatedly about the work and difficulties of repairing carts. George listened, nodding his head, and made a suggestion. "Why don't you clear that hill? It's the one that creates all the trouble." "And who will? Is it only me who uses it? Everyone else is driving, but I have to dig it up." William grumbled. The conversation turned into an argument, during which both men continued to drink. In the end, William returned home well after midnight, having spent a large portion of what he had earned. The door of the house was locked, and he banged for a long time until Thomas heard him and opened it. However, in the darkness, William could not immediately find the entrance and wandered around the yard, muttering something about his eyes being stolen. The next morning, Martha and William went to the fair, leaving their sons to fulfill their promise to clear the hill. Henry, however, went to the house where Susanna lived and stood at the gate for a long time, hoping to see the girl. Susanna, tall and slender, with intelligent, sparkling eyes, came out of the house with a bucket of paint in her hands. Her haughty manner and sharp remarks only fueled Henry's curiosity. The young man tried to joke, but the girl just shrugged her shoulders and responded with a pinch. Unable to look away from her determined gaze, Henry decided to cross the fence, but then her parents appeared in the yard. "What's all the commotion?" asked Mr. Carter, Suzanne's father. "The boar must have run away," she answered, winking at Henry, who quickly disappeared around the corner. The day was sunny and warm, but for Henry it seemed restless. As he walked home from his meeting with Suzanne, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something wrong. Her voice, every word, even the irritated notes in her response, kept echoing in his head. "Why couldn't I please her?" he thought as he sat on an old stump near Te Gate. "There is something unusual about you. You're not afraid to say what's on your mind. You're strong, smart, and beautiful." Henry looked away, feeling his cheeks flush. Suzanne smiled, but her smile was soft, without the same sarcasm. "Henry, I'm used to guys usually trying to impress me with words, but yours, they sound real." They stood in silence for a few minutes, looking at each other. Finally, Suzanne said, "If you really want to apologize, you can help me in the garden tomorrow. My parents have been asking me to tidy it up for a long time, and I always put it off." "Of course I'll come," Henry replied, his heart pounding with joy. That night he could not sleep. He could not sleep that night. He kept seeing her eyes and hearing her words in his head. He wasn't sure if this was the beginning of something more, but he knew one thing: he would do everything to make sure that Susanna never looked at him with irony again, but only with a smile. The next morning Henry woke up earlier than usual. He ate a quick breakfast and, taking his old work gloves with him, headed for Suzanne's house. He didn't even notice how several neighbors greeted him on the way, surprised at his early activity. When he reached Suzanne's garden, she was already there. Dressed in a simple linen dress with a headscarf, she was raking leaves into a pile. Her movements were nimble, but her face looked thoughtful. "I told you to come to help, not to admire," she said, not turning her head as Henry entered the yard. "I'm here, aren't I?" Henry smiled, realizing that her tone was just another form of joking. He quickly began to help her, and within minutes they were working side by side. Henry raked away old branches, while Suzanne trimmed the bushes, humming lightly to herself. "Do you sing often?" Henry suddenly asked. Suzanne stopped, thinking. "Only when no one is listening." "Then I'm lucky." Henry looked up at her, and for the first time since they had met, she was slightly ashamed. Working in the garden brought them closer together. They discussed small things, the weather, local gossips, but the more they talked, the more they opened up to each other. Suzanne told us how she used to love climbing trees as a child, and often got a scolding from her father for it. Henry recalled how he had once fallen from an apple tree and couldn't walk properly for 2 weeks. "You seem to be quite the brawler," Suzanne joked, giving him a playful look. "I'd say an adventurer," he replied, clutching the broken branch. The sun was already high when they finished. The garden looked almost perfect now, but Henry noticed that he didn't want to leave. "Would you like to stay?" Suzanne suddenly stopped him. "Henry, tea for tea?" Suzanne suddenly asked, drying her hands with a towel. "I'd love to," he replied, feeling his heart flutter. They sat down on a bench near the porch, and Suzanne brought a kettle of steaming tea and 2 cups. The conversation flowed easily, and with each laugh Henry realized more and more that it was not just sympathy. He couldn't imagine his life without that sparkle in her eyes and that sincerity behind her prickly words. When he was finally about to leave, Suz. "Yes," he turned around. She hesitated for a few seconds, then said barely audibly, "Thank you for today. I'm always here for you whenever you need me." Henry smiled, feeling as if her words were his greatest reward of the day. When he returned home, he realized that he now had a new goal: to become someone Suzanne could always rely on, and maybe someday even more. 2 years passed. Henry and Suzanne were married shortly after their mutual feeling became apparent to even the most skeptical of neighbors. Their home came alive with flowers in the garden and an atmosphere of joy and comfort. However, everything changed when they had a daughter, whom they named Anna. Henry was delighted when he held her for the first time, but life became more complicated. Susanna, who had always been independent and strong, began to lose patience. Her energy was now focused on taking care of the baby, and Henry threw himself into his work to provide for the family. "Henry, you're not helping," she said one evening when he came home tired. "I work from morning to night, Suzanne. You know it's not easy." "Is it easy for me? I'm with Anna all day, the house is on me, the food is on me." She suddenly stopped, realizing she had raised her voice. Anna in the next room began to cry. Henry remained silent, his shoulders slumped. He didn't know how to deal with this problem. The lightness with which they had talked and laughed on that first day in the garden was still in his heart, but now everything had changed. The days were getting busier. They no longer found time for long conversations and working together in the garden. In the evening, Susanna often fell asleep next to Anna, while Henry sat on the porch wondering how to fix things. One day, after a particularly difficult day, he decided to do something unexpected. He arranged for a neighbor to watch Anna for a few hours, and he took Suzanne for a walk. "I can't leave her, Henry." She's too young, Suzanne protested. Suzanne, please. We need this. We need time for each other, he said, looking into her eyes. She hesitated, but agreed. They went to the very garden where their story had once begun. Suzanne was silent, but as she looked at the familiar flowers and trees, she gradually relaxed. Do you remember the first time you poured clay on me? She suddenly said, smiling. Henry laughed. If I had known it worked, I would have done it more often. They sat on the bench and talked about how everything had changed. Henry promised to help out more at home, and Suzanne promised not to hide her feelings and ask for support. Suzanne met Tom 2 years after the divorce. He was her coworker, confident, charismatic, and attentive to her needs. At first it seemed that he understood and accepted the situation, because he had once gone through a difficult divorce. Therefore, it seemed that their love would be a new beginning for both of them. However, Anna did not accept Tom from the beginning. She watched him with caution, and every attempt he made to gain her trust failed. Tom brought her gifts, tried to joke with her, but Anna just shrugged her shoulders and responded coldly. However, Anna did not accept Tom from the beginning. She watched him warily, and every attempt he made to gain her trust failed. Tom would bring her gifts and try to joke with her, but Anna would just shrug her shoulders and respond coldly. She'll get used to it, Susanna reassured him, she just needs time. But Tom was not patient. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to hide his irritation. Suzanne, I can't live in a house where I'm not respected. Anna is always creating tension. She's an adult, let her live with her father. No. Suzanne objected sharply. Anna is my daughter, and she will stay here. And what about me? Am I not important to you? Tom insisted. These quarrels became part of their lives. Anna felt that she was the cause of the conflicts, and this only increased her dislike for Tom. Once, when Tom ordered her to stop almost laughing at him, she exclaimed, "You are not my father and you will never be." Tom, unable to contain his emotions, left the room, slamming the door. That night, Suzanne cried. She loved Tom, but her love for her daughter was always stronger. Henry, having learned about the situation, tried to talk to Anna, but she only said, "I want to be with my mom, Dad. Tom doesn't love me." Time passed, and the tension only grew. Tom insisted that Suzanne had to choose either him or the mess in the house. "I can't live with a man who makes me choose between him and my child," Suzanne said one evening after another fight. Tom exploded. "That's impossible, Suzanne. I didn't sign up to be a stepfather to a girl who despises me. And I didn't sign up for a man who is incapable of accepting my daughter," she replied firmly. Soon after, Tom packed up and left. Suzanne was disappointed and depressed, but deep down she knew she had made the right choice. Anna was relieved, but also worried about her mother. She went over to her when she saw her sitting on the couch, crying quietly. "Mom, I didn't want you to be unhappy. I wanted us to be like before, just you and me," the girl said, hugging Suzanne. "We will be happy, Anna, I promise," Suzanne replied, squeezing her daughter in her arms. Due to constant quarrels, a tense atmosphere at home and disappointment in her mother's relationship, Anna began to experience severe stress. At first, this was manifested only in irritability and lack of appetite, but over time, the girl became increasingly weak. Suzanne noticed that her daughter had been looking pale and lethargic for several days and decided to see a doctor immediately. Doctors diagnosed Anna with a serious nervous disorder that affected her physical condition. She was prescribed a comprehensive treatment, a change of environment, therapy, and prolonged exposure to the outdoors. Suzanne could not forgive herself for not noticing her daughter's condition earlier. She took a leave of absence from work and decided to devote herself entirely to Anna's care. They went to her parents' country house, where it was quiet and peaceful. "Mommy, I didn't want you to be so worried," Anna said in a weak voice as Suzanne tucked her into bed. "You are the most important thing to me, dear," her mother replied, hugging her daughter, "and I will do everything to make you smile again." Months of treatment and care gradually yielded results. Anna became more cheerful, showed interest in learning again, and started playing in the yard like she used to. She and Suzanne spent a lot of time together, walking in the woods, picking flowers, and just talking. This time helped them become even closer. Anna realized how strong and loving her mother was, and Suzanne learned to appreciate the moments they had together. When they returned home, life became calmer. Anna made a full recovery, and Suzanne focused on creating a stable and harmonious atmosphere for the two of them. A few years later, when Anna was already in high school, she told her mother, "You know, Mom, what we've been through has made us stronger. I am grateful to you for always being there for us." Suzanne smiled and hugged her daughter. "I will always be there for you, Anna. We will overcome everything together." Their home was filled with laughter again, and their hearts with peace and joy. Despite all the trials, they learned to appreciate each other and understand that the most important thing in life is the support and love of loved ones. Over time, Anna became more and more confident. Not only her teachers were pleased with her academic success, but also her mother, who always supported her daughter. Their evenings at home were filled with warm conversations, discussing books they read together. Anna took her studies seriously, and over time, her dream began to come true. University, internship, first consultations, she felt that she had finally found her calling. At this time, Susanna also took an important step in her life. She started writing articles about parenting, work-family balance, and the importance of emotional support. Her texts resonated with readers because she wrote not only as a professional, but also as a mother who had gone through difficult experiences. One day, after publishing another article, she was approached by representatives of a local organization that supported families in crisis. They asked Suzanne to join their project, and she gladly agreed. One evening, after a long day, they were sitting on the terrace of their house. Anna looked up at the starry sky and said, "Mom, it's so good that we have each other." Suzanne smiled, gently stroking her daughter's hand. "My daughter, you are my pride." Their home continued to be a place of love, peace, and support. Anna and Suzanne inspired each other to new achievements and proof that family is the greatest strength in any creature. At the age of 16, Anna fell in love for the first time. Your chosen one, Oleg, was a charismatic and daring guy who, in Suzanne's opinion, was not the best influence on her daughter. Anna changed, she became irritable, short-tempered and withdrawn. She turned to her mother less and less for advice, and quarrels began to arise between them. "Why do you constantly criticize Oleg? You just don't want me to be happy," Anna shouted, slamming the door to her room. Suzanne felt helpless and hurt. It was hard for her to accept that their bond, which had seemed so strong, was shaking. But she realized that it was not just the whims of adolescence, but something deeper. One evening, after another fight, Suzanne sat down at the table and began to write a letter to her daughter. She knew that in a moment of irritation Anna would not listen to her, but perhaps later these words would touch her. She left the letter on the table in Anna's room. A few days later, Anna, having calmed down a bit, found time to talk to her mother. She left the letter on the table in Anna's room. "Mom, why do you dislike Ola so much? He's a good guy. Daughter, I have a bitter experience with men, and because of that I am very careful about everyone." Later, Anna broke up with Ola because they did not understand each other. After breaking up with Ola, Anna felt broken for several days. It seemed to her that the world had lost its brightness, and feelings of disappointment and shame overwhelmed her. Susanna was there for her, not judging or preaching. She simply listened to her daughter, made her favorite tea, and made it clear that she always had work to do. Suzanne also drew conclusions. She realized that her daughter had grown up and was entitled to her own experience, even if it was painful. She decided not to interfere in Anna's life unnecessarily, but to always be the support her daughter could find in the most difficult moments. Suzanne made a cup of warm tea and went out to the balcony, where she could see the view of the evening city. Her thoughts were full of worry, but also a certain lightness. She knew that she could not always be there to protect Anna from the world, but now she realized that her role in her daughter's life had not diminished, it had simply changed. Somewhere in the room, Anna was writing something in her notebook, occasionally looking out the window in thought. Her face no longer looked as tense as it had a few days earlier. She had made a choice that would probably change her life. But only time would tell if it was the right one. Suzanne took a breath of fresh air and smiled cautiously. She decided to trust time and Anna. After all, life is a collection of mistakes and discoveries, and support and love are what really matter. The first stars shone in the distance, and Susanna made a wish. She didn't know what the future would hold for them both, but she was sure that every page of this story would be written with love and wisdom. Susanna left the cup on the table and walked slowly into the living room. Her eyes fell on an old photo album she had opened with Anna, showing her moments from her childhood. She sat down on the couch and picked up the album. Flipping through the pages was like watching a movie, where each scene had its own emotion: the first step, the first day at school, laughter on a summer trip. The door of the room opened and Anna entered the living room. She looked a little tired, but her eyes shone with determination. When she noticed the album in her mother's hands, she stopped. "Those memories again, Mom?" she smiled as she approached. "From time to time it's good to remember them," Suzanne replied, looking at her daughter. "They help us understand how we got to this point." Anna sat down next to her, her fingers unconsciously touching the edge of the album. They sat there in silence, looking at the photos. "Mom," Anna began after a pause, "do you think I can do this?" Susanna looked at her daughter. Her face reflected anxiety and hope at the same time. "I believe in you," she said warmly, "you're stronger than you think. And even if something goes wrong, I'm here for you. But the most important thing is that you have to believe in your choice." Anna thought about it. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but her mother's support gave her strength. "You have no idea how important this is to me, Mom," she said, hugging Suzanne. They sat there for a few more minutes until Anna's phone rang somewhere in the next room. She stood up, looked at her mother, and said, "Thank you, Mom. I'm going to go." Suzanne nodded, watching her daughter walk confidently to her room. She felt like she was letting her go, but not quite. Because no matter how far Anna's journey takes her, a mother's heart will always be there for her. And while Susanna sat in the silence of the evening, somewhere outside their apartment, life was writing a new chapter for each of them. What it would bring was up to them.